You could walk into an American home 50 years ago and know exactly what decade you were in before anyone said a word. Maybe it was the faint glow of a television cabinet in the living room, the ticking clock in the kitchen, or the telephone ringing from the wall while somebody hurried in from another room to answer it. Maybe it was a smell, coffee percolating before breakfast, clean sheets brought in from the clothesline, dinner warming in the oven while the evening news played somewhere behind you. Or maybe it was something smaller, something nobody thought to photograph because it seemed too ordinary to ever disappear. A button jar, a metal ice tray, a stack of records, a dish drainer beside the sink, a phone book with somebody's number written in pencil on the cover. These things were not decorations from another era. They were simply home. And if you grew up in America during the 1960s or 1970s, some of them may still be waiting in a corner of your memory. So don't just look at these 25 things. Listen for the rooms around them. Remember who was there. Remember what home sounded like before we knew any of it would become the past. Before a telephone belonged to a person, it belonged to the house. It had a place. Maybe on the kitchen wall beside the calendar. Maybe near the hallway, and when it rang, the sound seemed to travel through every room. Nobody glanced at a screen to decide whether the caller deserved an answer. Somebody got up, picked up the receiver, and often heard the rest of the family asking who it was before they had even said hello. For teenagers, privacy was measured in feet of telephone cord. You stretched that curly cord around the refrigerator, through a doorway, or down the hall, trying to create a private world while the rest of the family remained only a few steps away. And if someone else was expecting a call, you heard the familiar warning, don't stay on the phone all night. A single telephone meant the whole family shared the same doorway to the outside world. Wrong numbers and busy signals happened. Calls were missed without anyone knowing they had come. Yet somehow, people managed. And years later, many people can still remember the exact wall where that telephone hung. Close to the telephone was often a book thick enough to prop up a child at the dinner table. The phone book was the internet of the neighborhood before anyone had heard the word internet. You searched for people by last name, businesses by category, and sometimes discovered just how many families in town shared the same surname. The white pages were dense and practical, while the yellow pages seemed endless. Need a plumber, dentist, or pizza place? You let your fingers do the walking. Certain pages became bent from use. Important numbers were circled. Others were copied onto scraps of paper and taped beside the phone. Children sometimes flipped through the book simply to find their own family name in print. There was something reassuring about it. Your town was in there. Your neighbors were in there. In a strange way, the whole community seemed to fit between two covers. Then, a new edition arrived at the door, and yesterday's indispensable book became something nobody knew what to do with. The television did not hang on the wall. It sat in the room like it owned the place. Many sets were wrapped in wood, with knobs you turned by hand and speaker grills built into cabinets heavy enough that nobody casually rearranged them. Some looked almost like another piece of living room furniture. And in many homes, the furniture gradually began pointing toward it. When a favorite program came on, there was no watching it tomorrow at your convenience. You were there, or you missed it. Families gathered at the same hour. Children sprawled on the carpet. Dad settled into his chair. Someone might call from the kitchen that the show was starting. If the channel needed changing, the person closest to the television suddenly had a job. Turn the dial. A little farther. No, go back. And when the picture finally settled, the room settled with it. For a few minutes, everybody was watching the same thing. Of course, the television could only show you what the antenna managed to pull out of the air. That was where the rabbit ears came in. 2 metal rods rose from the set, and adjusting them could become an evening ritual. One person stood beside the television, moving the antenna by inches, while somebody across the room judged the picture. Better. Worse. Go back. Stop right there. Then the person adjusting it carefully let go, and sometimes the picture immediately turned to snow again. Rooftop antennas created their own rituals, especially when weather or distance made reception difficult. And yes, aluminum foil sometimes appeared on indoor antennas in homes where somebody was convinced it helped. A perfect picture was never guaranteed, which made finally getting one feel like a small victory. Look at enough family photographs from the era, and you may notice an object sitting quietly in the background: an ashtray. It might be heavy glass, ceramic, metal, decorative, or a souvenir brought home from a trip. It could sit on the coffee table beside a newspaper and a cup of coffee as naturally as a remote control sits there today. Smoking was woven far more deeply into everyday American life then, including inside homes. Relatives visited and smoked while they talked. Adults smoked over coffee. Some families kept ashtrays even when the people living there did not smoke, because a guest might. For children, the object itself was ordinary. Maybe you remember being told not to touch it, or the smell lingering after company left. Today, an ashtray can make an old room instantly recognizable. Back then, nobody would have thought twice about seeing one. Somewhere in the house was a place where damaged things went before anyone considered throwing them away. Often, it was the sewing basket. Lift the lid and you entered a tiny workshop of thread, needles, pins, scissors, measuring tape, spare buttons, snaps, and scraps saved for reasons known only to Mom or Grandma. A torn seam did not necessarily mean a trip to the store. A missing button was a problem with a solution already waiting in the house. Clothes were patched, hems were repaired, socks were darned in some homes. Garments were altered as children grew. And many mothers and grandmothers could make the repair while carrying on a conversation as if their hands were working from memory. Perhaps that is what people miss most about objects like this. Not the basket itself, the hands that used it. Then there was the button jar. It looked almost worthless until you needed exactly what was inside. Buttons were clipped from worn-out clothing because throwing away something useful made little sense. Over the years, the jar became a jumble of colors, sizes, shapes, and forgotten garments. Pour it onto the table, and there might be a button from Dad's old work shirt beside one from a child's winter coat that had disappeared years ago. To a child, it could feel like treasure. To an adult searching for a replacement, it was inventory. Nothing matched, until suddenly, something did. And without anyone intending it, the jar quietly preserved pieces of clothes the family no longer owned, and years the family had already lived. Before ice appeared automatically through a refrigerator door, there was the metal ice cube tray. You filled it with water and carried it carefully to the freezer, trying not to spill half of it before getting there. Hours later came the difficult part. A metal lever ran across the tray, and pulling it was supposed to crack the cubes free. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the frozen tray seemed determined to keep every cube forever. You twisted, pulled, ran a little water over it, and tried again. Then came that satisfying crack as the cubes finally broke loose. Drop them into a glass of iced tea or lemonade, and they clattered with a sound that belonged to summer. Today, ice is effortless. Back then, even a cold drink to begin with a small household battle. Opening a refrigerator in those days could require courage. Not because the food was frightening, but because the containers could not be trusted. A margarine tub might contain leftover vegetables. A whipped topping container might hold gravy. A coffee can in the garage could be full of nails. And the beautiful cookie tin you opened with great expectations might contain nothing but thread and sewing needles. Families reused containers because an empty jar or tub still had a job left in it. Coffee cans held screws. Glass jars held coins. Small boxes held rubber bands, receipts, or spare parts. Children learned an important household lesson early. Never believe the label. Some kitchen sounds told children to keep their distance. The pressure cooker was one of them. It sat on the stove doing something mysterious beneath a locked lid, while steam and a rocking regulator announced that serious cooking was underway. Adults understood it. Children were less certain. You might have been warned not to touch it, not to bump it, and definitely not to ask whether it was ready every 30 seconds. Pressure cookers helped families prepare certain foods faster, but the old stovetop models demanded attention. Their hiss became part of the kitchen soundtrack. Years later, modern electric versions would make pressure cooking popular again. But they do not quite recreate the childhood feeling of watching that little weight move on top of the pot and deciding it was probably safest to stay on the other side of the room. Morning had a sound before it had a screen. In many kitchens, it was the bubbling of a percolator. Coffee did not arrive instantly. It announced itself slowly. Water heated, coffee brewed, and the smell began moving through the house before everyone was fully awake. Maybe Dad was already dressed for work. Maybe Mom was packing lunches. Maybe a radio was giving the weather while children tried to find a missing shoe. The percolator sat in the middle of all of it, quietly marking the beginning of another ordinary day. Children who did not even drink coffee came to know that smell. Decades later, one unexpected whiff can bring back a kitchen more clearly than a photograph. That is the strange thing about home. Sometimes memory enters through the nose before it reaches the mind. There was a clock on the wall, and everybody lived by it. It told you whether you had 5 minutes before the school bus or whether you were already in trouble. It told Mom when dinner should be ready. It told Dad whether there was time for one more cup of coffee before leaving. It watched homework, phone calls, baking, chores, and late arrivals. And when the house became quiet, you could hear it ticking. Tick, tick, tick. No notifications, no glowing display asking for attention, just time moving across the wall. Most families never considered that clock important. Yet ask someone to picture the kitchen they grew up in, and surprisingly often, they can tell you exactly where it was. Somewhere beneath that clock sat the table where family life accumulated. It might have had a formica top, chrome or metal legs, and vinyl chairs that made a particular sound when you slid across them. Breakfast happened there, so did homework. Bills were opened there. Groceries were set down there. Birthday cakes were cut there. Newspapers were spread across it on Sunday mornings. Children colored pictures while adults talked above them. Someone drank coffee at one end while somebody else searched for a pencil at the other. The table was scratched, wiped, bumped, leaned on, and used. It did not need to be beautiful. It needed to survive the family. And perhaps that is why people remember it with such affection. It stood at the center of thousands of moments nobody knew were memories yet. Sometimes that table disappeared beneath a vinyl tablecloth. Flowers, fruit, checks, geometric patterns, bright colors. Every kitchen seemed to have its own. The surface was cool and smooth beneath your arms. Spilled milk could be wiped away in seconds. A sticky spot might remain until somebody came back with a damp cloth and a little more determination. There was often a soft backing underneath, and after years of folding, certain creases seemed permanent. The tablecloth appeared at everyday breakfasts, family dinners, holiday gatherings, and backyard meals. Nobody called it nostalgic. Nobody called it vintage. It was simply what was on the table. And sometimes, seeing the right pattern today can make a person remember not just the kitchen, but who used to sit across from them. After dinner came the dishes. In many homes, that meant standing at the sink. Warm water, dish soap, plates disappearing beneath bubbles. The dish drainer waited beside the sink, filling with plates, glasses, bowls, and silverware. Sometimes one person washed and another dried. Children were assigned jobs they considered deeply unfair. You washed last night. It's your turn to dry. Arguments happened there. So did conversations. Parents heard stories about school while rinsing plates. Brothers and sisters whispered and complained. Someone looked out the window into the dark backyard while drying the same drinking glasses the family used every day. Nobody called it quality time. It was just doing the dishes. Maybe that is why it mattered. On laundry day, the backyard changed. Sheets rose into the air. Shirts hung shoulder to shoulder. Towels, socks, dresses, work clothes, and children's clothes moved in the breeze beneath rows of clothespins. Hanging laundry was not quick. Wet clothes were heavy, and every item had to be pinned, dried, taken down, folded, and carried back inside. And the sky had a vote. A sudden summer shower could send someone running into the yard, pulling clothes down as fast as possible. But on a clear day, sheets dried in the sun and came inside carrying a smell that seemed impossible to manufacture. Children ran between them. The wind lifted them. For a few seconds, an ordinary backyard became a maze of white fabric and sunlight. Some memories survive because they were extraordinary. Others survive because they happened every week. Along the clothesline came a small companion almost nobody would have thought worth saving. The clothespin bag. It hung within reach, filled with wooden pins polished smooth by years of fingers and weather. A practiced hand could grab a clothespin, secure a shirt, reach for another, and keep moving without looking. Children found other uses for them. They became craft supplies, clips, tiny building pieces, pretend people, or whatever imagination required that afternoon. A clothespin dropped in the grass might stay there until someone found it days later. The bag itself faded in the sun. It was ordinary enough to become invisible. Yet seeing one today can bring back someone you loved, doing a chore you barely noticed at the time. Dry clothes did not always mean finished clothes. There was still the ironing. The board opened with a metallic clatter and claimed part of the kitchen, living room, or laundry area. A basket of wrinkled clothes waited nearby. The iron heated. Steam rose. Sometimes spray starch hung briefly in the air. Shirts, dresses, school clothes, work clothes, and pillowcases passed beneath a practiced hand. The radio or television often kept the person ironing company, while children sat nearby doing homework or watching a program. We remember the neatly pressed clothes. We rarely remember the hours someone spent making them that way. That is true of many things in an old home. The comfort children remember was often somebody else's work. When a child asked a difficult question, there was no search engine waiting in a pocket. There might, however, be an encyclopedia on the shelf. A full set looked important. Heavy volumes stood in order, often with matching bindings and letters printed across their spines. School reports sent children searching from one volume to another. Space, presidents, dinosaurs, ancient Egypt. You found the right letter, pulled out the book, and began turning pages. But the best part was getting distracted. You could begin by researching Saturn and end 20 minutes later reading about shipwrecks, volcanoes, or some animal you had never heard of. Information arrived slowly enough for curiosity to wander, and sometimes what you accidentally discovered became more memorable than the assignment. Taking a photograph once meant deciding that a moment deserved one of the limited frames left on the roll. You could not take 20 versions and choose the best. You aimed, you clicked, and you hoped. Weeks or months later, photographs returned from development, and the family finally discovered what had been captured. Some were crooked or blurry. Someone blinked. A thumb appeared in the corner. They still went into the album. Birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings, new babies, grandparents, first cars, graduations, backyard cookouts. Page by page, the album became a family history nobody had formally planned to create. And when you open one today, the background can hurt more than the subject. The old sofa, the curtains, the lamp, the kitchen doorway. Things you had completely forgotten until one photograph put you back in the room. Of course, not every photograph made it into the album. The rest went into a box, often a shoebox. Inside, decades could become mixed together. School portraits beside vacation snapshots. Christmas in 1968 beside a picnic from 1975. A young grandmother beside people nobody could identify anymore. Some pictures had names and dates written on the back. Others offered no clues at all. You held one up and asked, "Who's this?" Then someone older began telling a story. That was how the box worked. The photographs were only doors. The real archive was the person beside you who remembered what happened before and after the shutter clicked. And when those storytellers were gone, the handwriting on the back suddenly mattered much more. Before music followed you everywhere, you went to the music. In some homes, it waited inside a console stereo large enough to be furniture. Lift the lid, and there was the turntable. Nearby were the controls, radio dial, speakers, and the family's record collection. Choosing music was deliberate. You looked through albums, selected one, removed the record by its edges, and lowered the needle. For one brief moment, there was only a faint crackle. Then the room filled with music. People did not put on headphones and disappear into separate worlds quite as easily. The music belonged to the room. If Dad played a record, everyone heard it. If a teenager played the same song again, everyone heard that too. Family members sometimes learned one another's music simply because they shared the same walls. Records themselves demanded a kind of attention. The album cover was large enough to study. There were photographs, artwork, song titles, credits, and liner notes. You held the music before you heard it. A favorite record developed signs of a favorite life. A worn sleeve, a softened corner, maybe a scratch that caused the needle to jump at exactly the same place every time. There were LPs and smaller 45s, some stored carefully, and others stacked wherever space allowed. Children learned to handle them by the edges, and everyone knew the little ritual. Slide out the record, place it on the turntable, set the speed, lower the needle, wait for the crackle, then the first note. Music began with anticipation. There were nights when dinner left the kitchen table and moved into the living room. Out came the TV trays. Thin folding legs opened in front of the sofa or favorite chair, creating just enough space for a plate, a drink, and perhaps a dessert if nobody moved too suddenly. For children, eating in front of the television could feel like a special occasion. ATV dinner made it even more distinctive. The meal came divided into little compartments, and somehow, eating from an aluminum tray while watching a favorite program felt modern. The tray might wobble, a glass of milk might sit dangerously close to the edge, and someone would inevitably warn a child to be careful. But when everyone settled in and the program began, the living room became the dining room for the evening. And then there was the drawer that contained everything the house had forgotten how to classify. The junk drawer. You opened it looking for one thing and discovered 20 others. Rubber bands, old keys, tape, string, batteries nobody trusted, a screwdriver, pencils, coupons, thumbtacks, mystery screws. A tiny piece of plastic that someone insisted belonged to something important. The drawer could become so full that opening it required lifting the contents with your fingertips while pulling. Closing it was another challenge. Yet whenever someone asked where an odd little household item might be, the answer was almost automatic. Check the junk drawer. Perhaps that is why it belongs at the end of this list. Because unlike so many things in the old American home, the junk drawer somehow survived. And maybe we needed it to. Because homes have always been filled with things we cannot quite bring ourselves to throw away. Not because they are valuable, but because they might still be useful, or because somebody we remember once used them. When we look back at the homes of the 1960s and 1970s, it is tempting to remember the big things first. The cars in the driveway, the television programs, the furniture, the wallpaper. But home was built from smaller sounds. A telephone ringing from another room, ice cracking from a metal tray, a record needle touching vinyl, clothespins dropping into a bag, a spoon against a coffee cup, the kitchen clock after everyone else had gone to bed. And home had smells. Coffee in the morning, laundry from the line, dinner cooking before Dad came home. A freshly ironed shirt. The faint scent of a room after relatives had visited. Most of all, home had people. The person who answered that telephone. The person who stood at the ironing board. The person who saved every button. The person who washed while you dried. The person whose handwriting is still on the back of an old photograph. When we say we miss these old things, perhaps the objects are only part of what we mean. Maybe what we really miss is the world that existed around them. A world where certain people were still in the kitchen, where familiar voices still came from the next room, where the house we grew up in was not an old address. It was simply home. That is why one forgotten object can stop you for a moment. Because suddenly, You are not looking at a telephone, a table, or an old record player. You are remembering a room, and then you are remembering the people in it. If one of these 25 things took you back to your own home, tell us which one. Better yet, tell us about the ordinary thing we forgot. The object that was in your house, the sound you still remember, or the little family routine you thought everyone had. Those memories are worth keeping. Because this channel is not only about old things, it is about the life that happened around them. Welcome to Homes of Yesterday. There are still many rooms to go back to.